It's a great day, isn't it? Where we share knowledge. And before I invite Peter on the stage, I should say that yesterday he was on a conference like this, but in San Francisco. So you can imagine all the jet lag and all the vitamins he had to lose on the way here. So make sure you smile the next 30 minutes. You know, not our usual face where we write code, you know, the serious face, but let's have a welcoming face, you know. Peter Zaitsev, Pirkona, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone, right? Now, I was just wondering who exactly here will be able to hold his smile for full 30 minutes?
HRs.
Yeah, can we arrange a prize for that person?
Marketing.
Who can hold the smile?
Yeah, marketing people.
Okay.
And politicians.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's kind of special kind of people. Okay, folks, we are going to talk about artificial intelligence in SQL and data analytics space. And this is my perspective. I'm not AI expert, right? I'm kind of database geek on one side and entrepreneur on the other side. So that will be from this point of view. Okay, so let me ask you first, who are you guys? Who do we have here in the conference, right? Which of you are more like application developer side? Okay, that's cool. What about, data scientists or more kind of like a business user which corresponds to data? Okay, well, not too many. Any AI experts? Okay, cool. And any folks who are kind of more experts in databases? Okay, cool. So another thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your take on AI, right? Somebody I spoke recently was kind of, one discussion I saw recently was about discussing what AI is going to do to all the kind of jobs, right, and everything, right? And I think there was like having kind of two perspectives. One said, well, you remember there was, calculators invented a bunch of years ago, and that didn't reduce the need for mathematicians. And I would say, well, but on the other hand, when the horses were replaced by automobile, that wasn't so good for horses, right? So which of you thinks what this AI revolution we have right now is kind of more similar to calculators? Anyone? What about horses? Any horse people? Okay, cool, that's good. Well, anyway, let's dive in. And I am going to go in there for AI kind of review in a high level, and then we'll talk about some of the things for what AI can do for databases from the different angles. Now, if you look at the AI from a very high level, right, how does that work, right? We have, certain model which we train on some sort of existing data, right, and then we can feed it the new data, right, through a process called inference, right, and then it can provide us some outcomes based on that, right? And then usually we would use some sort of like a feedback loop with that to improve. Now, if you think about AI, this is obviously like not a new thing, right? AI has been out there for multiple decades and kind of have number of those kind of like revolutions and then kind of dissatisfaction, right, and so on and so forth, right? I remember in our university when I studied, well, now many years ago, professor said, well, you know what, if you would want to study AI aspects in computer science in 70s, that was the best way to kind of ruin your career. It just like it was something which would be, doing so much and, producing so little results. But so what were we able to do with AI until kind of a few years ago, right? Well, we actually can do a lot of things with AI models so fast in the inference space, right? You had be able to, classify data, maybe, able to, take some action based on AI, for detecting, fraud or anything else, right? Prediction, right, was quite commonly used with AI, or some sort of transformation, right? If you think about, for example, translation was, AI based for quite a while. What I think what's happening very recently is the generative AI or Gen AI came into a picture, and that is different in what it's actually not able only to classify or predict data, but it actually can generate the new content, right, of a different forms based often on some sort of prompt, right, as well as the other additional context, right? So I'm assuming many of you have used some AI tools before. How many of you played with ChatGPT, right, or similar tools? Okay, cool, right? So you understand all of that. And some of those things are quite mind-boggling, right? Anybody of you guys saw the Sora demos? Yeah, so like a Sora is not yet publicly available thing, but that is something which allows you to generate the videos based on AI, right? And that is something which would be, I think just a few years ago, very hard to imagine. Now, one way I think is valuable to talk about a lot of AI value is this approach, right? If you think about how we are using AI in a lot of a business context, right, is we have what you can think about as a brain, right? Hey, you have like various LLM models, right? Often that could be like a cloud-based as a ChatGPT. Then often you would have to integrate that with some additional knowledge you have, right? That's, corresponds to your industry, maybe your company, some proprietary data you have, right? And then they often also integrate that with some sort of, tools so we can, take an action, right? I think that is a very interesting concept in a lot of applications, right? For example, in marketing, we can say, hey, you know what, we can use LLM, right, ChatGPT, for example, to generate marketing emails based on our customer database, and then we'll have that kind of like tools or skills so we can, send the customized emails to a lot in the other our data set, right? What also have been happening with AI, which is very interesting, is it's always have been used for a lot of good, but also for a lot of evil, right? If you guys have been following industry, there are a lot of AI-based hack coming to a picture. Like this in the news, for example, was about somebody uses kind of a deep fake AI model to kind of fake multiple colleagues on somebody's Zoom call to compel somebody to transfer $25 million kind of to, somewhere else, right? And that is also very, very interesting, right? Because I think a lot of us think like, well, you know what, if you are shown a video as a proof, right, of, something, right? Your wonderful girlfriend with somebody else, well, that's for real, right? But now, well, actually, it's become increasingly easy just to, generate that, right? And all that digital video and especially image content, you don't really know what to believe. The interesting thing in AI, and I think what is also important evolution, is prompt as an API, right? If you look at the ChatGPT and then a lot of other tools, which came to copy that was a very important innovation because that made that ubiquitous available to non-developers, right? You think especially a lot of their, younger folks, right, use messaging in chat, right, as a communication over time, and that was kind of very natural way to transition that to communication with AI, and I think that is why those things are really become so very easy to use compared to require absolutely no development skills compared to any kind of separate API. Finally, I wanted to highlight what this place has extremely fast pace of innovation, right? So I would be quite sure some screenshots I would show would have look very different because everything changes every day. And I think what is interesting in AI space, especially if you think about that cloud-hosted AI rather than like open source AI solutions, right? Some features may be added and some features may be removed because a lot of those folks are concerned about like safety. Oh, if you think something is not safe to use, right, we will we will remove it, right? I think it's interesting, right? A lot of models, even in chat, try to remove some knowledge about, like, well, if you ask, where do I buy drugs, right? Or how to buy drugs without being caught by police, right? They may not want you to ask to answer those questions. Okay, so anyway, going in about AI in a data industry. I think in this case you can think there are very different users which can benefit of using AI, and also we have, I think, two classes of tools. One is we have been building some special purpose tools using AI. Let's say, oh, we are using this kind of very special AI which can resolve some of this, small, particular task to analyze the data or do the prediction or maybe, generate code or something. And I think what is interesting is what a lot of those specialized tools increasingly also being replaced with general purpose tools. If you think about like a ChatGPT, for example, it is able to do all kind of tasks. Or you can see those specialized tools may be built as a very thin wrappers around general purpose tools kind of to really do a little bit of prompt engineering. So if you look at business focus, what are the tools in AI which are, I think, particularly interesting? One is their data analysis, right? This is focused on data analysts from ChatGPT, but there are also those developments coming up, from other AI companies. What I think is interesting in this case as example, right? You can provide the data set and provide some instructions, right? What to do in the data with the data, right? And you can get a lot of information, right, about that, which I think can be quite cool. Again, that may look like a very obvious thing, and say, hey, I can do that in like a couple of easy commands, but if you are not a developer, that can be quite cool. Now, if you have some developer jobs, right, and if you say, well, you know what, I want to understand if this thing is doing the right things or if it's actually doing some, not what needs to be done. The cool thing is what in ChatGPT context, you can also ask it to show its work, and it will show you some code, right, how exactly it is done, which again, something you can copy and use in your program, right, or modify if it's not done correctly. Another thing with an analyst, it does not only work with data like CVS, Excel, right, or whatever, but you can also even upload some images to it, right, and ask what that means, right? Like, for example, if you look at this case, you can upload that image and ask it something like, well, I did their advertisement campaign at this date, how successful what is. And it will look at the graph and tell you, oh, well, you know what, looking at the graph, your traffic was increased by yada yada, right? Again, looks basic in this case, but for certain kind of users, that's quite wonderful. You can also use it to generate the charts and diagrams based on the data you have, which is pretty cool. Now, another thing what is very useful for is the data cleanup, right? Obviously, a lot of data which comes to us is not particularly clean form, and what is interesting in this regard, you can actually ask it to do multiple steps, right? Hey, we don't want a code to fetch the data, right, and do some cleaning with it as a result, right? And that gives you some code which you can use, like for example, to put in development pipeline, because probably you don't want to do things manually all the time. Now, what we also see, what there is increased number of tools which allow you to access your data, right? Because you think about the ChatGPT saying, well, you know what? Yes, I can load kind of some small Excel files or CVS, but you know what? If I have a many terabytes of data, right, or even like a many gigabytes, right, that's not what's going to work, right? And probably I don't want to have my confidential data uploaded kind of to a third party, right? So there are other tools which can help you, right, either to like specifically upload files, or they can connect to your database, right, and then use metadata about the database, right, and its jobs to generate the SQL queries to do that, right? And I think in this case, you can see a number of tools, right? Some chat with your data, ChatGPT for SQL, and you can see just what is like a couple of days ago, Snowflake also released their solution, like what they call SQL Assistant, right, or Snowflake Copilot, which allows you to generate the queries based on the prompt, right? So that becomes the more and more comfortable way to do it, right? And again, like to steal another slide from a presentation, I think I'm not quite sure we're quite there yet, right? But I think there is a lot of work going to make sure what their most powerful language to work with the data is English, right? And not Python or SQL. Now, if you've been in this space for a while, you also know that there is, for like last decade, a lot of no-code framework come into existence, right? And in a lot of cases, they always allow users kind of to, sort of like connect some, blocks, right, to design the workflow you want to design, right, to do similar things. And we can see with AI that can be taken to their next level, what you can increasingly describe what you're looking for in this way, and that's going to completely to improve. Some of the new developments in this case here. Have you guys, anybody heard about this announcement of Devin, AI software engineer? Right, yeah. So I think that is interesting. Now, in this case, it's always kind of interesting when you look at a lot of AI stuff, right? It's kind of, their demos look absolutely fantastic, right? It's the question how it works in a kind of real world environments. That's usually kind of where, you may have some, raw edges. But I think the point, what we are going from, let's say, kind of more narrow Copilot helping you to kind of to do the niche code generation, to something which, in this case, positioned as more kind of full-blown developer, right, which can do a lot of solutions on a project. I mean, that's pretty cool. Again, like you can hopefully see the link out there, right? You can Google and read more about that and watch some demos. That's pretty cool. AI, we can also see AI and kind of LLM-based solutions are also very interesting in terms of predicting things, right? If you look at the context of a sales and marketing, we often would use kind of like for some predictive statistical model for years, right? Hey, you know what, we looked at, you know, this solution works, so how, based on the past, how we can predict our sales or something, right? What I think is interesting in this case is now we can use AI often to work with a lot of unstructured data, right? For example, you can say, well, let's look at all our kind of customer interactions, how they've been, you know, working with our support team, right, to see how likely they are to renew, right? And or is there some upsell opportunities, right? That is, I think, is a very interesting ways, right, which can generate a lot of value for business. Okay, moving on to developers. So, how many of you guys used any AI tools for code generation? Anyone? Okay, how did it work? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Camp Awesome. How many think that's kind of awesome? Okay. How many you think you can do better than AI? Okay. Good. Good. Well, and in this case, you obviously have a bunch of tools. And again, we can both see the standard tools have an increasingly their, like I would say, general purpose tools, increasing the code generation compatibility, as well as we have also AI often built in the developers tools, right, in different ways, you know, to generate the code, particularly from GUI, right, to generate database schema, wherever. Again, coming from a database space, I also follow generating SQL a lot. And it's interesting how, again, in just like couple of short years, we can have almost this all like a field, new field, which is born, right? There's some called like NL, like a natural language to SQL, right? Or text to SQL, right? And we have, you know, a bunch of tools, benchmarks, right? Research going on with this space. Well, even general tools like ChatGPT have some functionality in this case, right? As well as the tools I showed before, as you know, Snowflake's solutions. And I think what is interesting in this case is that also can work now with a multimodal skills where you can upload the image, for example, and say, hey guys, this is kind of how my database schema looks like. Based on that schema, load it up, right? And to me, that's kind of that's where it's really interesting how it's able to integrate sort of your image recognition skills, sort of, right, with actually doing some work, right, with that, right? I think that's kind of connection which is quite interesting. Now, as I mentioned, this is now the whole kind of like a field of SQL to natural language to SQL, and we even have some benchmarks in this regard. Now, what I think is interesting in this case, we can see that there is a lot of models which can be used for this purpose. You know, some of them are closed source or proprietary, right, and some of them are open source. Now, what we can see is those like proprietary models are better at those task skills, but also what you would see is what the open source models actually getting better, right? If you would look at those graphs, you know, a year or so ago, right, the difference was much better. And I think what is exciting in this regard is what we are quite likely to see the open source solutions which will be good enough for most of the typical tasks, right? Of course, if you need to, you know, resolve something, you know, super complicated, you need like a, you know, gazillion the words, right, or tokens, context window, right, and whatever. Yes, that's may require you to have like a massive cloud-hosted AI, but for simple tasks, we will be able to use the open source solutions which are run on our devices, right? Even like on the phones. Schema design. that's another example, right, from a tool, right, which says, hey, if you want to create a schema, right, you can sort of describe how you want what your application is going to be, right, and it can design you some schema, right, visually, and then you can also create a database tables, right, to look at SQL for that. Again, like I think pretty cool tools. Another way which I think where AI is very interesting is generating synthetic data, right? Why is that important? Well, again, from a database guy's standpoint, right, and somebody, especially somebody who works with a database performance a lot, you often have this concern, right? Well, I have my fantastic, massive production database with realistic data, right? But if I take and do tests on it, well, it's kind of, I risk exposing some confidential data, which is bad, right? Or often I would have to have my development environment follow all those kind of security and compliance rules, right, which I may not want. Or I could generate the data set on 1,000 rows, right, and then I wouldn't really be able to, test application from performance side. Now, what we can do with AI tools and generate synthetic data, right? We can say, well, please generate me the data which would not contain any confidential information, but it will look from distribution properties, right, and others, just as real data. I think that is kind of pretty cool. And you can generate as much as you want, right? You want to see, hey, how your application will behave if you are going to give, 10x more data. You can do that. Another use case I found, which I think quite interesting for developers, especially like engineers who do not have like a very good design skills, is what it actually can help give you some design ideas for UI, right? For example, for dashboards, right? You can have some ideas how I can, visualize certain data. You can ask AI to generate you, right? And again, it's probably not going to be kind of very useful, but that can give you some nice presentation ideas for for a use case, right? Which may be, less vanilla, which you would able to come up by yourself. Okay, the next topic to talk about is the vector search, which is actually technology which support building a lot of applications which use AI. Okay, anybody here heard about vector search? Build an application using some vector search solution? Okay, cool. So let's explain kind of what vector search is and what's up with vector, right? Now, if you are pretty far from this industry, you may say, well, you're talking AI, and why we're talking about vector search, right? What does it have to do, right, with one another? Now, the thing is, where we are talking about the images, text, documents, right, wherever, that is not what AI algorithms really work, right? AI algorithms inside is pretty much work with vectors, and there is a lot of kind of like a very, complicated vector math, right, which is being performed inside to really get that, or get you all that amazing features, right? So one core things of the many AI approaches is what we will go ahead and take the real world object, right, for example, image, right, or text, and we encode that in a format called embedding, which is, pretty much like a high dimension in a vector, right? And then often you need to do then some operations on a vector. For example, if you have something as simple as a image recognition task, right? I can go ahead, encode the image on vector, and then look on a similar vector. You can say, well, you know what? It most likely looks like an apple, but it also may be tomato, right? But that tomato vector is not as similar, right, as an apple vector, but you know what, that still looks more close than a cucumber, right? So something like that. Now, what is interesting in this case is what that thing of finding similar vectors, right, and related tasks are not handled by the traditional relational databases very well, right? That's is not solved by the, is not optimized by the B3 indexes, right, and so on and so forth. So now, what specific tasks you can do with those vectors besides what I mentioned? One is over like a pattern recognition, very much using vector search in many cases. Then semantic search. Have you heard about this problem, right? When you I want to do like the search, right? But I want to look at that based semantically, not just by the keyword match. And that is actually something you can see, like a lot of major search engines changed that, right? You may find what, you are looking for something, right? And then even if you describe it with one set of words, right, you may find the documents which are semantically similar, right? But you use different words to describe the same thing, right? That's semantic search, right? And that's typically uses some of those things. Or another task where vector search is used a lot is RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Anybody heard about this? Yeah, so that is like one of the way how we can sort of connect the LLMs, right, if our specific industry knowledge, right, or knowledge relates to a particular user and so on and so forth. Okay. If you look at vector search, how does it stand in terms of databases? And I think that is very interesting. What you can see, there is a lot of support out there, right? You can see like pretty much starting from 2019, right, which is like, well, just 5 years ago, right? But now it's available in a lot of databases, and you can see both in traditional database as well as number of open source vector-focused databases have been created. So, and now where I want to highlight here, I think that MySQL is kind of funny to see that the only one doesn't have anything going yet in open source version. I think a lot of that stuff because Oracle wants to keep those AI MySQL innovation restricted to their only cloud-based heatwave edition. But I think something will come, just not yet. Okay. Finally, let's talk a bit about the operations, where AI can be used in operations. One is security, right? I think that is a very common use case where using AI-based tools is fantastic because it's just so hard to try to define everything in that space with specific rules, right? Especially when intruders are kind of trying to be very creative. Then we also look at performance, right? Well, if you think about these are as it relates to their databases, you can see there's like a lot of tools which can say, hey, we are going to help you to set the options, database, parameters, tune the queries, and so on and so forth, right? And I think what is interesting in this case is what we have as standalone tools, but also as well a lot of cloud providers, right, either have it already or working on it, right? For example, for years, Oracle has been talking about like Oracle Autonomous Database, right? Like, well, we have some AI doing that stuff, right? Well, in the background, that AI was kind of a lot of people first, right? But I think it's gradually moving to less people, right? And more machines. But that's kind of an interesting thing. When you run stuff in a cloud, you don't really know, right, how much is done by human, how much is machines. FinOps, that is also a very interesting thing, right? Because, well, in that case, we have a better performance, right? That has lower cost, right? And that is where AI can have it can often also look at that from another angle, saying, well, I know the cost in the cloud. How can I advise you most effective infrastructure or way to deploy that infrastructure for your environment? Maybe use reserved instances here and spot instances there, right? Or also for many large companies, the problem can come like in a cost allocation, saying, oh my gosh, I have this kind of environment, but who is really responsible for this or that? That's also where we see some tools using AI being built, because again, funny enough, that's an interesting problem. Then in terms of general operations, we also now have for years this term AI ops. Anybody heard AI ops? Yeah. Now I think for a while it also was kind of oversold term, right? We have something saying, oh, we have like AI ops, right? And then you can say, well, it's not really too much AI, and that's not really too much ops here. But I think now we're getting more and more capabilities in that space too, right? Like have ability self-healing, after scaling, in some cases helping with either advisory, right, or automatic resolution. Now, here I also want to mention one of the projects I am involved, which works in this space, which is called Karoot, open source project focused on the observability, focused on automated root cause analysis. Okay. Finally, I wanted to talk about concerns and problems people have with all that AI jazz. Right. Well, one is intellectual property, right? And this is kind of not really the technical thing, right? That is something which has to be just, settled through policy and kind of legal decisions, right? It's like, well, who owns the property, generated by AI, right? And how do we really kind of look at that, right? I mean, well, let's say if we have like something like Sora generates a movie, right? Well, can it win the Oscar, right? Or right? Or who's going to be awarded, right? Or stuff like that, right? Or even if AI-driven car killed someone, you're like, whose responsibility is that? There's kind of a lot of questions in this case, right? Like, there's relationship between training data, right, and generated data, right? Like, what if AI pretty much recreates the original work of art it was trained on, as kind of happened in a number of cases, right? Well, is that stealing, or is that not, right? Like, a lot of challenges here. Well, security and privacy, that is also a concern for many, right? A lot of AI is kind of being cloud-based, and that's a question what you upload, what kind of feedback you provide, how that can be inadvertently having the confidential info, right, released. In many companies, I know, like, their AI policy is like, oh, nope, never use any kind of confidential data, never pass that to AI, right, on one side, and then also we are seeing that kind of demand to sort of like an isolated cloud environments, where in a cloud or on-prem, right, where we can see data can never potentially be exposed to their other problems. And I think that is where you see the open source AI and data sets are also very important, right, because that is where you have control of how and where you run it, right? You don't have to, trust vendor promises what we will, never ever sell your data to anyone. Now, I think lock-in is another problem to consider, right? I think the AI companies, right, starting from OpenAI, have been kind of using the open term and even like open source term in not exactly correct context, right? Many of the solutions out there would be like, oh, it's kind of it's open source, but actually it's free for non-commercial use, right? So that can be problematic. But again, I think the good thing here is what a lot of open source solutions are being developed, right? And as often happens, we will see the open source technology is kind of good enough for most commodity use case. We also have the concern with over-reliance and excessive trust, right? And I think especially that applies to people who doesn't understand AI too much, right? You say, hey, you know what? I ask AI a couple of things, right? It seems to be correct, right? Well, and then you start blindly trust it, right? I think trust to AI may be, similar to the, trust to Wikipedia, right? Which is, in many cases it's fantastically correct, right? But in many cases that would be also, grossly wrong or biased, right? Or whatever. So we have hallucinations, mistakes. When it comes to developer, we can get like a code which may be generated, but it may be suboptimal, or have problems with security and so on and so forth. So that's what we have. Okay, well, that's pretty much it what I have. I have still a few minutes for questions, but before that, one more thing. So some of you may say, well, Peter, you come to this event, you often talk about something nuts and bolts about the databases. Well, not today. But the good thing is we as Percona also have a free event called Percona University here in Limassol tomorrow. So if some of you want to join that, then you're welcome to. Just Google Percona University, you're surely to find it. And yes, that's it. And then we have the wonderful Alex. Yes, come on here. So are you with horses or with calculators?
No comment.
Oh, yes, yeah. He stepped out. That's where I started
You can easily answer any question with...
Me?
No comment.
No comment. Yes. Who did you study that with?
Pavel Durov. Any questions, guys?
Questions.
Thank you. Great presentation, first of all, very impressive. And question is, for AI, one of the biggest problem I face when I generate code or something, it sometimes hallucinates. And if we do, so gives you right answer and then gives something which looks like right answer, but when you look at it closely, it's not right. So, and we take the, let's say, data analytics on something like, let's say a manager tells me, okay, give me all the employees, show me the low performers, and then who can I fire? And then in this last step, it just generates something else. As we rely on AI more and more, do you see any like long-term solution for it? Because we eventually will rely on this more and more, especially people who are not deeply in the data.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of like an interesting question, right? I mean, because what you are saying, kind of course, right? A lot of technology for years, right, have been kind of empowering that kind of information which can be used and misused, right, in different ways, right? And AI just takes us, in this case, to the next level, making that even easier, right? And I think that's kind of for a long time. I know, like what you would say. Well, like people tell, like, oh, we have like information, let's say, or data-driven decisions, right? They'll say, well, that is a bad idea, right? You probably don't want to kind of be driven by the data, right? You want to be informed by the data, right? Because there are many ways where it doesn't have you a full picture, right? Or data can be bad and so on and so forth, right? And that is what I would also encourage with AI. Let's say, hey, be informed, right, with AI, but don't trust it blindly. Right, and specifically, you're right, in terms of that kind of hallucination, like with all the stuff I'm saying, hey, look what ChatGPT can do, right, and that's kind of like a fantastic demos, but you know what, certain of those things, they can be wrong, right, well, and we just have to know it can be wrong, right, and not trust it blindly. Now, what is interesting thing in this case is, so are developers, humans are often wrong too, right? If you look at some junior developer creating his SQL, is that going to be better than AI-generated SQL? Probably not, right? But so the problem is, as you would have somebody to verify that work of a developer, you should approach the AI same.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was interesting topics and interesting to hear about it in general, how it's today, what is using, which project about AI. And I wanted you to ask about how you think about the future, the next 5 years, which will be trends in data analytics, in field of that, which is connecting to AI, which breakthrough. And the second question is about how will be changed the required skills for data analytics?
Oh, well, I think it's interesting, right? Because one thing you can see, and I think in AI in particular, right, is what we have not been very good at predicting, right, how things evolve in the future, right? And I think often we like to project the trends, right? But it doesn't quite work this way, right? I mean, if you think about, I remember about like 2010, like for example, almost like 15 years ago, right? And you would say like, wow, self-driving cars are around the corner. My sister would refuse to get a driver license because I can say, why bother? I'll get like a self-driving car in 3 years, right? Well, but we wouldn't imagine something like a Sora or ChatGPT at that time, right? But guess what? Now we got the AI-generated movies, right? But we're still kind of almost there with self-driving cars, right? So I think that is something what we should expect in the future as well, right? In this case, some surprises in terms of what developments would be, right? But to your questions about like a preparing skills, right? I think as with any kind of new technology, it's important to follow the trends, right? Experiment, learn of them, right? If you want to stay there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now it's a good time to move to the discussion zone. So we will take your microphone, and right outside the hall, you can answer questions without being recorded. Thank you very much for your talk. Please rate the talk also. And for those of you who haven't noticed, we have one name on the roll app and the other name on the screen. So the next talk over here will be by Aaron, and he'll talk about a fast and efficient local development with Kubernetes and telepresence. Take a note of that. And have a nice evening, guys. We have 2 talks to go and then the after party.